Hey, true crime fans! Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news! With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free true crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free true crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
The new Boost Mobile network is offering unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for life.
That sounds like a threat.
Then how do you think we should say it?
Unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for the rest of your life?
I don't know.
Until your ultimate demise.
What if we just say forever?
Okay.
$25 a month, forever.
Get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile forever.
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Hello and welcome to 31 Days of Terror 2024, and we are on day number 26, and our story today comes from Gavin and was sent in on the 22nd of September 2024. Creepy kids run in my family. Unlike most people who say things like this, most of us were boys, not girls. Before I was born, my oldest brother started sleepwalking. My parents would find him curled up in a ball asleep at the top of the stairs or in the built-in wardrobes of their bedroom. Soon after, he started fighting with invisible people in his sleep. He would kick and swear and shout and cry, asking and begging to be left alone. As unsettling as this was, they put it down to bad dreams and his sleepwalking causing night terrors, and he eventually grew out of it. Now, my parents had 3 kids before me, and they were all close together in age. But I was a happy accident, according to my dad, or the only planned one, if you asked my mum. And my closest sibling was 10 years older than me. So by the time I was on the way, we had to move house. They found a nice 3-bedroom in a friendly street and got to building 2 extra bedrooms over the garage so we could all have a bedroom each, which my sister was pleased about, given that she had been tasked with sharing with the baby. I would often wake her up with my giggling and screaming in the night, fighting off invisible assailants who appeared to be tickling me. My mother was so upset that this was happening again that she refused to put me to bed alone. And if I was laughing in the middle of the night, my dad was sent to check on me, which was all good and proper till I learned to walk, and they started finding me curled up in a ball asleep at the top of the stairs. As I got older, I remember being into creepy stuff. I was obsessed with horror films and insisted on being allowed to watch stuff for people way older than I was. My mother figured I would probably get shown it by my older brothers, who had grown into problem teens by this time, so figured if she let me watch it and I got scared, I might not be so keen to keep asking. She was wrong. I was shown Nightmare on Elm Street at the age of 3 because I refused to go to bed, and it was the 80s. My parents hoped it would teach me a lesson, but alas, I slept soundly afterwards. I soon developed an obsession with Michael Jackson's Thriller. I used to giggle and point at a specific dancer in the zombie lineup and say, "That's Grandma. That's what Grandma looks like now." I'd never met my grandparents. They had died before I was born. One day my parents left me in the care of my brothers as they went to get the weekly shop. When they got home, my brothers were upstairs, one playing guitar and one on his computer as usual, but I was nowhere to be seen. Static on the television and my Thriller tape sitting in the VHS. My parents had recorded it every time it was on television. Some the full experience, some the shortened one with just the song part, on the same video cassette so that I could watch it a few times in a row without rewinding. They eventually found me hiding behind the sofa, wedged between it and the wall, tear-stained and shaking. I can't remember what happened that day, but my brothers insist they didn't do anything and hadn't actually been spending time in the room with me. That got them in trouble. I refused to watch Thriller anymore until I was much older, but I've never shaken the feeling that something weird happened. I remember frequently waking up and seeing the shadow of a large black dog in the hallway outside my bedroom around this point. But I don't know how or if it connects to the refusal to watch Thriller. When I was about to enter my teens, around 11 or 12, I started waking up with the cord from my bedside lamp tangled around my neck. It happened once a month or so for a few months, and around the same time we started seeing my brother when he wasn't there. He had moved out before this, and so had my other siblings, but me and my mother used to still see someone who looked like him wandering around the house. Just little catches of him out of the corner of the eye, always in a white t-shirt, with shoulder-length black hair, which was how he wore it at the time, always walking away from us or not looking at us. He walked past the top of the stairs or into the kitchen just as you entered the corridor. This went on for years, until he moved back in with us, and he started fighting in his sleep again, having not done it since he was a child. Around that time, my parents and I started having annual visits to York. Being a creepy goth teen by this point, I was obsessed. The atmosphere is amazing, and all the little shops and the creepy legacy they buy into left me with a great love for the place to this day. We would always end a day trip with a ghost walk, trying different ones every time. Some have spook actors who jump out at you, some have stories you will not hear anywhere else. But they all feature a choice selection of the favourites: the Romans in the basement, the girl in the window, the dog in the minster, things like that. There are alleyways all over York called snickleways. You know what sort of alleyway they are, the ones that you enter through an archway under an upstairs floor of a home or an office, into a pathway between two buildings. They exist in every city, usually as a smoking area of a pub or a dumping place for the wheelie bins. But in York, they are often particularly narrow and were deemed worthy of a name. One visit, I think I must have been about 15, we were walking a new ghost walk and were standing on a street we hadn't been on before. You often have periods of standing waiting for one ghost walk to leave a location so yours can enter and get the story told. Standing in one of the snickleways, I saw a man in a brown hood and a robe-like cape. I pointed and said quietly to my parents, "Look, there's an actor waiting to jump out on someone," which is what I naturally assumed it was. My parents insisted that no one was there. I started speaking a bit louder, a little unnerved at this point, gesturing more obviously and insisting they must be looking in the wrong place. Despite my clearly rising incredulity, they refused to acknowledge that there was a person standing there. The people around us started asking what we were getting so worked up about, and they said no one was there either. It was only as we started walking again that an old woman caught up with us and touched my shoulder. "I saw him too, sweetheart. I don't think he was here for everyone." As we pulled into a courtyard to hear a story about a black dog sighting, my parents mentioned what I had said to the guide. He said that no ghost walks did scares in this area anymore due to complaints from the residents, and that they had introduced fines to anyone who did. When Cilla Black's husband died in 1999, there was a big furore about it, as their love was one for the ages and all that. I remember we were watching daytime television one day when I was home from school, and they had a double-page spread of the funeral in the newspaper. My nephew at the time was only small, barely able to talk, but he brought it to me, laid it out and pointed at a picture of Cilla at the top of the page. "The mum is sad because the dad," he pointed at the picture of her husband, "is in there." He pointed at the picture of the coffin. He had no experience of death at the time and was so young, every woman or man over a certain age was the mam or the dad. Like I said, creepy kids run in the family. When I was 17, my parents moved us to a new part of town, to a new house. When I saw it for the first time, my stomach sank. Something about it made me feel sick to my stomach. It was a perfectly lovely house, detached, and set back from the rest of the houses on the street. It was a pleasant day, not too sunny or too gloomy, but I felt like the windows were way too dark, and that something bad would happen if we lived there. 2 weeks after moving in, my parents went on a 3-week trip to Hawaii to celebrate their wedding anniversary and left me there in a house full of boxes and creepy shadows. I asked a friend at the time to come and stay with me and she agreed. She was very sensible, so while she acknowledged that it was a little creepy, she was sure it was just because of the way the light came in through the windows and the half-unpacked boxes around the place. We decided to spend the time between going to college and generally enjoying living without parents for a while, unpacking for my parents and making the place more of a home for them. One night, just over 2 weeks into the 3-week trip, we were sitting watching a movie on TV. I think it was Dude, Where's My Car, just to age me, and there was a loud bang on the side of the house, on the wall behind the TV, from outside the building. It sounded like a sledgehammer had hit the brickwork, and we both jumped out of our skin. Armed with a hammer and a kitchen knife each, we went outside to investigate and found nothing. The backyard was fully enclosed and the gate was locked. Later that night, my friend took our dinner plates into the kitchen as we were getting ready to go to bed, and I heard a loud scream and the clash of plates hitting the floor. I dashed through, and she was as pale as a ghost, plates dropped everywhere, standing in the hall, backing away from the dining room, which you had to pass through to get to the kitchen. "There's someone in there," she insisted. But I looked and saw nothing. She told me she had been walking through and turned on the light, and there was a black outline of a man in the far corner of the dining room. We hurriedly got things put away and went to bed, barely sleeping. She left the next day after, and left me alone in the house to deal with it for the last few days. That corner has always been strange. The dog hates it and will not go near it. I was devastated. I did not want to be alone in the house. 2 nights later, I encountered the most terrifying night of my life. The stairway in my parents' house goes up the middle of the house between their room and mine at the time. The walls from each side of the stairs connect directly to our rooms, and when you get to the top you have to U-turn left or right to get into either bedroom. Mine left and theirs right. I was trying to sleep when I heard a noise downstairs. We had a house alarm and it was connected to the windows and the doors, so I knew no one had broken in. But it was enough to get me sitting up with the covers pulled up under my eyes. It sounded like someone opening and shutting drawers and cupboards in the kitchen, and it started moving around the downstairs level. Suddenly the wall connecting to the stairwell shook with such a huge bang. It sounded like someone had kicked or punched the wall at the foot of the stairs. I'm very surprised the next series of events didn't lead to me absolutely ruining my mattress, because the bangs continued, along with the creak of footsteps as someone or something walked incredibly slowly up the stairs, banging the wall harder and harder as it rose to the second floor. There was an airing cupboard or hot press in my room on that wall, and as the bangs continued, the wall shook so much that the hatch popped open, revealing a black empty space inside which I was terrified of looking into. As the bangs reached the top of the stairs, the final bang hit with so much force my bedroom door popped open a few inches. I hid under the blanket and cried for hours until I fell asleep, and when I woke up the doors were still open, but the rest of the house appeared undisturbed. My parents called that day and I explained what had happened. As I've said before, my dad is a skeptic, but my mum believed me. She has always said that she knew what fear sounded like in her child's voice, even if I was fully grown. She said to try and get more people to stay with me, and that by chance they booked a trip to visit a traditional Hawaiian healer or kahuna the following day, and she would ask for advice. In the meantime, I had as many friends over as I could, and nothing much of note happened until the last night, the night before my parents came back, when my friends could not stay. I got up in the night to pee and found what looked like blood all over the toilet bowl. I called my friends and no one would admit to any injury or having their period, and I searched the house, the kitchen, knife and hammer in hand, but no one was there. The kahuna gave my parents a carved stick and a wooden mask to bring back, and told them to leave it by the front door, and they would make the dark spirits leave and new ones turn away. It seemed to work. Ish. Weird things have still happened there and still do, but nothing so threatening or scary as what had happened beforehand. For example, one time at a family Sunday lunch, my other newest young nephew at the time looked into the same corner of the dining room suddenly and, with a quiver in his voice, said, "You know Randall from Monsters Inc.?" We answered that yes, we knew Randall because we all knew a lot about Monsters Inc. as he was only 3 or 4 and it was his favourite movie. Spoiler warning for a 23-year-old movie here, but Randall is the villain of the piece. He is a purple lizard that turns invisible and can climb walls. He's not real, is he? Eyes fixed in the creepy corner. We answered that no, monsters weren't real and Randall was just a cartoon. "That's okay then," he said quietly. His eyes lingered for a second before he pulled them away, took another bite of food and asked if he could go and play. Soon afterwards, my friends moved into an apartment in an old apartment block in the city and began experiencing a very violent and distressing haunting in an apartment they had moved into. I brought the stick there and stayed the night with one of them one evening as the other had to go away for a few days. They had both been woken by the silent image of an old man screaming a silent scream in their face, and neither of them wanted to stay there alone, along with poltergeist activity and the sight and sounds of a girl crying, who they said looked to be very, very young. We went to bed after a few drinks and no real problems. But I remember waking in the night and thinking, I don't remember a black bathrobe on the back of that door, before falling back to sleep, eyes blurry. There was no bathrobe, black or otherwise, in the apartment. I was into witchy stuff at the time, so I researched in some books and I made them some charms with rose quartz, amethyst, lavender and rose water to keep under their beds. We loaned them the stick, moving the mask into the front of our own house, and after moving room to room, shouting loudly that they lived there now and that no spirits were welcome, everything calmed down for the rest of the time they lived there. A year or so after that, I was up late in the night. I am a night owl and was on summer break from college, so despite it being 2 a.m, I was not overly sleepy, and I'd woken up so late in the day it felt like early evening. I was going downstairs for a snack after spending some time reading in my bedroom. As I turned to walk down the stairs, I saw something out of the corner of my eye heading into the dining room. I turned and looked directly at it, only to see a man in a sort of tobacco brown overalls walking through the door. He was dirty with white hair, and as he walked through the door he looked over his shoulder at me and paused for a second before vanishing. I would recognise this man if I saw him again. His eyes were the bluest eyes I think I've ever seen, and he looked friendly. There were no bad feelings, and despite being a little freaked out, it was not a scary experience. There was something awkward about it, like I'd walked in on something I shouldn't have. So I slowly backed back into my room and waited a while before building the courage to go back downstairs and get my snack 30 minutes later. I've since researched and found out that the land my parents' house sits on was used as a coal mining site decades before the estate was built. I also found pictures of the uniforms they used to wear, and to my shock, they were the same tobacco brown colour. I was the one in the house that helped my mum put up the Christmas decorations, and that year, while we were getting things unpacked, my mother noticed some things were missing. She always had little snack bowls out with nuts and sweets in them, as I think is quite common in the UK and Ireland around Christmas. Mostly they were little cut crystal bowls, but she had a set that were shaped like the individual letter of the word party, but the bowls shaped like P and A were missing. We searched every box and every cupboard for them, and in the end resorted to going to the spare rooms. Like our own bedrooms, the spare rooms of my parents' house mirror each other at either end of the landing, with the bathroom between them and the door to the bathroom facing the stairs. I went in one and my mother into the other, and we searched those rooms for about 20 minutes before I heard her say, "I found them!" I poked my head around the door only to see my mum do the same, as we said in unison, "You found them!" "You said you found them," I said, to which she explained how she had heard my voice shout that I had found them just before she came to the door to check. As we were discussing this, a shelf fell off the wall in the bathroom, scattering things everywhere, and we both jumped out of our skin. We never found P or A, but we still have the R, T and Y in a box somewhere. Eventually I moved out during my second year of uni into a shared house with 7 bedrooms, a big Georgian thing with loads of rooms and lots of renovation. One evening I went to the kitchen and stood at the island making a sandwich. It was at one end of a big open plan room that encompassed a dining room and a living room area all in one. And as I looked up into the living room, I saw a friendly looking old woman in full morning gear sitting in one of our comfy armchairs. She looked out of it, a giddy look on her face, and she was only visible for a few seconds before she locked eyes with me, smiled and disappeared. Her nose was, shall we be polite and say, strong, and again I would recognise her if I saw her again. The next place I lived, I heard noises all the time. Mainly people calling to see if anyone was home, only to find that I was alone. After uni, I started talking to someone online. We hit it off and love brought me across the water to Dublin. I moved into a 3-floor house above a shop in Ranelagh, and one of my housemates was a witch. One night she had a few of her friends over. I guess her coven, although to my knowledge it was never formalised, and they were sharing their spooky stories. She mentioned how the room she used to sleep in, she had taken the opportunity of new housemates to switch rooms herself, had always upset her, as sometimes she would feel someone come into her room and get into the bed with her. Now, she did say admittedly that she suffered from a variety of sleep disorders, and shrugged it off, saying she thought maybe it was just because of its location in relation to the street and her not sleeping well, and maybe she was wrong. A few months later, the guy who lived in that room was in the kitchen looking rather tired and upset. He confessed to me that he kept getting disturbed in the night, thinking his girlfriend was getting into bed with him after going to the bathroom, only to remember she was on a summer trip to America, and he would wake up to see no one there. My bedroom was directly off the living room, and I would often be woken by people chatting in there, only to find there was no one in the room at the time, and sometimes no one in the house at all. When I had to move out of there, sadly recently broke up with and desperate for somewhere to live, I found a basement apartment in a building on the edge of the city centre. It was perfect for just me. But I kept having dreams that someone would burst through the door into the room while I was asleep and stand there staring at me. They would always be backlit and I could never see their face, but they were tall and would just stand there looking at me. I shrugged it off as nerves about living alone for the first time, and eventually the dreams stopped. A year or so into living there, I got a job working from home and had to set up an office space in the corner of the studio. I would occasionally wake up to find the office chair had moved into the same space the man in my dreams would stand, always facing the bed as if someone had been sitting, watching me. Eventually my building was sold to a vulture fund, and the housing crisis in Dublin meant that I had to move back to the northeast of England, this time with a new boyfriend in tow. We found a cute little upstairs flat and settled in, ready to enjoy our first place together. And we did enjoy it, except the times we both saw a boy who looked to be early teens peeking around doors and staring at us. He was pale and had sickly shadows around his eyes and black greasy hair, like something out of a Tim Burton film. You'd just see motion and turn to see it for a split second. One hand on the top of a face just looking into the room. Although by now I was just grateful to not be alone with my experiences. We now live in a house, and it's not without its strange experiences. More than once has a white blur gone towards the kitchen and through the door, and sometimes we are subjected to the very rare smell of cigarettes, even though we don't smoke. We're both well used to this sort of stuff at this point. But the last one, and the most recent, was the one that really upset me. I know who this one was. Sadly, a year or so ago, a man was found dead on a patch of grass near my house. His death was from exposure, as it was the middle of winter and he was found naked in the snow. All very mysterious, but seemingly just a sad case of someone disorientated, either from drugs or a mental health crisis, and not able to look after themselves. The saddest thing is I had seen him earlier that night in a park near my house. My boyfriend and I had gone on a snack run to the local shop and cut through the park in the dark, and we saw him scuttle off into the bushes. He stood out in the pitch black because I thought he was wearing a pale tracksuit. We live in quite a rough area and it's not unusual for people to meet in the park for sinister reasons. So we assumed he was just up to no good and walked a different way back. We woke up the next day to the news. The guilt still lives with me that I didn't stop and question why someone would be sitting alone in the park with no coat on in that weather. A day or two later, I woke up for no reason, feeling watched. I turned towards my bedroom door to see an unnaturally tall, blurry, flesh-coloured figure standing in my bedroom doorway, with black holes for eyes. This was one of the most unnerving and sad things I've ever seen. Again, it lasted a second, maybe less than a second, and I saw him 2 more times that week. I didn't say anything about it as I figured it was some sort of guilt around not at least reaching out to the man and didn't want to upset my boyfriend, who was also struggling with the fact that we might have been able to help him. It wasn't until a month or 2 afterwards that I mentioned how messed up I had been about the whole thing and mentioned how I had kept seeing this shape of a man around the house for a week or 2. He had seen it too. From a little calculation, we think it was the same time. At least the times it was in the bedroom. I hope that man found peace. I guess he must have, as he stopped appearing very soon afterwards. And so far, that's all. Honestly, maybe I'd have had a more peaceful life if someone, upon finding me sleeping in a ball at the top of the stairs, had just kicked me down it, like you so often suggest. But mostly it's just been weird. Strangely, I don't fully know if I believe in ghosts. Isn't that funny? I honestly totally get it, right? Lots of people have experiences and they're still like, well, I still don't know if I believe in ghosts, even though they've had what on paper and what to the observer sounds like a paranormal ghostly experience, right? And I think a part of it is sometimes if you say, yes, I unequivocally believe in ghosts, I do think people look at you funny. I think people are like, okay, whatever, you're easily susceptible or whatever. That's not what I think. But some people are judgmental of people when they say they believe in ghosts. But also, I think if you say, yes, I believe in ghosts, and yes, all of these things that happened to me were paranormal, there's an element of having to alter your worldview, which is quite alarming. Like when you really dig down into what that means, all of these things that happened to me, I 100% believe they were paranormal. You kind of have to alter your worldview a bit. And that's a bit scary. Because suddenly there's a lot of new possibilities that are opened up. So going back to the very beginning of, creepy kids running in your family, I love the fact that it seems to run through the boys in your family because, like we often say, it's often passed down through the female line in families and your mom ended up with a whole load of spooky boys. And night terrors are such a terrifying thing, right? Obviously, clues in the name. I used to have a friend in uni who had night terrors and the things that he would do at nighttime was insane. And one of my nephews does a bit of sleepwalking, a bit of night terrors. Like, it's really terrifying to watch. Imagine being your ma and then, you come along 10 years later and start doing the same thing. I'd be like, listen, I would be drop kicking you down the stairs. That is for sure. And I wonder if you and your brother just had that sensitivity to something and that you were enacting it at nighttime, you were more exposed to it at nighttime. Because don't get me wrong, right? Night terrors, sleepwalking, parasomnia, all sorts of sleep disorders are very real things that happen without any sort of paranormal intervention. But maybe, based on your history and based on the pattern of this happening between brothers, etc., maybe it was about you picking up on energies that were in the house and enacting them at nighttime. I also remember being a spooky kid and being completely obsessed with the Thriller music video. I mean, it was like a film, wasn't it? Like, it was so groundbreaking at the time. But I do wonder, like you obviously, what happened that made you suddenly go, I'm never watching that again? Like, what was the association that you had made that meant that Thriller was now off limits? Was it the large black dog? Was it the association between those two things that made you suddenly not want to watch it ever again and be absolutely terrified of it? And also, we've got more doppelganger action in this story with, you and your mum seeing a version of your brother knocking around the house. And I will never understand these doppelganger energies. I just will never understand it. Is it that simply it is an energy in the household that is always there, that is knocking around, and it learns to take the form of a living entity that is in the house. And actually reading this has made me want to go to York yet again. Like, it sounds so amazing. I've never been to York, and I really want to go and visit the Snickleways and also eat loads of food and go and see all the different haunted locations. It's on my list. And I guess, you know, doing those ghost walks and stuff, you're always going to automatically assume that any kind of character that seems out of place is a jump scare actor or an actor that is there to tell that part of the story. And clearly, you and this older woman were meant to see that man or had the ability to see that man. And I feel like this is a running theme in your life, that you just have this ability to see these things. That's what it is. And then you end up seeing them, and there's not really much more that you can do about it. And that experience in your mum and dad's house sounds absolutely horrendous. From hearing the big bang on the wall outside the house, and also, you know, hearing the cupboards, the drawers opening and shutting like somebody is going through your stuff. I often think about that kind of situation because there's often stories about people hearing cupboard doors opening and closing, or going downstairs and all the cupboards are empty, are open rather than empty, sorry. And you hear these stories and you think, what is happening there? And I always feel like, is it an entity that is frantically looking for something? Or is it an entity going through the drawers and presses and going, this is not my stuff. What the fuck is in here? What is in all these drawers? What is in all these presses? What is in all these cupboards? None of this is mine. This is my space. And all of this random stuff is in here. And I would imagine that the banging so hard that the door opens, etc., the drawers opening and closing, the cupboards opening and closing, I would imagine it's related to whatever your friend saw that made her drop the plates, this sort of masculine shadow energy. And equally, it sounds like your little nephew also experienced that too. And it described it in a way that he could describe it, which is the bad guy from Monsters, Inc. who can disappear into the shadows. And it really does sound like there was a mixture of things in that house, because you talked about how you saw like a miner, well, what seems to be a miner, who had the overalls on, you know, piercing blue eyes, an older man. You both registered that you had seen each other, but it didn't feel scary. That doesn't feel the same as whatever it was that was banging on the walls, like smashing through drawers and presses and stuff. And it equally doesn't feel the same as that entity that is kind of calling out and saying, you know, oh, I found them, in your voice and your mom's voice, that kind of trickster, confusion, annoying energy. I'm very aware there's so much going on here that I'm like bouncing from story to story, so I do apologise. And it really does feel like you are a beacon for this kind of stuff. Like, you're going to see this kind of stuff, you're going to experience it, you are going to pick up on those energies, you know, you're going to get these flashes of seeing entities, seeing spirits, seeing people who have loved and lost, people who, you know, may have died in that particular area. But the thing that really gave me the heebie-jeebies was when you said that you were living in that ground floor flat, or that basement flat, and you kept having that dream of that man coming in to stand and watch you sleep, and then the office chair was moved as though someone was sitting watching you sleep. That fucking gave me the heebie-jeebies. Again, entities, give it a rest. Give it a rest. There is no need to be sitting watching people sleep. Find a better hobby. Also, Tim Burton-esque teenage boys peeking around doors. Again, find a better hobby. Just step out and say hello. Stop with the peeking. Okay, it's unnecessary, and it adds a certain spooky element that I believe needs not to be added. Thank you so much for listening to day number 26 of 31 Days of Terror. Thank you to Gavin for sending in your stories. Remember, Gavin's stories came in on the 22nd of September 2024. But also remember that I've been jumping around a lot with these stories. I've been moving things around as I've been going. So the dates, we're going backwards and forwards on a timeline here, okay? If you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
To get people excited about Boost Mobile's new nationwide 5G network, we're offering unlimited talk, text, and data for $25 a month.
Forever.
Even if you have a baby.
Even if your baby has a baby.
Even if you grow old and wrinkly and you start repeating yourself.
Even if you start repeating yourself.
Even if you're on your deathbed and you need to make one last call.
Or text.
Right, or text the long-lost son you abandoned at birth.
You'll still get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile.
Forever!
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Forever.